Welcome to the Neurosage Hub Podcast. We are an educational community for those impacted by autism and a place where neuroscience meets compassion and where families, practitioners, and educators come together to rethink what's possible. I'm your host, Justin Barton, and I'm joined today again by Dr. Jen Dharamaraj, a visionary neurodevelopmental chiropractor from Brisbane, Australia, who works with autistic children and specializes in helping them communicate in ways. And she's been successful with over 40 children and adults in doing this. And I'm excited to continue this conversation with Dr. Jen as we continue into this next episode. In this episode, we're exploring fine motor skills, those small but mighty movements that shape independence, expression, and confidence. Dr. Jen and I will dive into simple strategies that turn frustration into freedom. Dr. Jen, why don't you take just another minute? Explain a little bit. Last time we talked about gross motor development and strategies. Today we're talking about fine motor development. Educate the layperson like me or anybody else out there listening the difference between gross and fine motor movements and why both are important.
Okay, so gross motor movement is basically getting our bodies used to gravity. So it's walking, crawling, getting our bodies going from being in utero and she's standing upright and being able to do things in gravity. Now, we need the gross motor skills to develop before we can have fine motor skills. So people often miss that step, that we need to know our stability, where we are in space, before we can actually do fine motor skills. The thing with fine motor skills, we're mainly looking at our hands. So there's something called the Palmer Reflex. It's a primitive reflexes. So what happens is that's like the grasp reflex. So when a baby grasps mum's finger, it's a wholehearted grasp. What happens is that at 4 months of age, that reflex should do what we call integrate, or it should go away. Most of the kids that come in still have that grasp reflex. Now, these poor kids are being told to write with a grasp reflex. So they grab the pens. If you have a look at how they're holding their pencils, they don't have that fine motor skill. They can't do the pencil grip they want them to. It's very hard for that child. The other thing about having a Palmer reflex is your brain can't perceive how much pressure is being put on that hand. So if you watch these kids when they write, they are writing through the paper. They're putting a lot of pressure. That's because the brain can't perceive how much pressure is needed. So for that to check your child's Palmer, it's really easy. It's just getting their palm flat out, and then you draw a big cross in the middle of it, and it shouldn't flex, shouldn't do a grasp. If that happens, that means your child still has the Palmer reflex. So getting them to do fine motor skills is an uphill battle because the brain's not ready for that. Once you integrate the Palmer reflex, their handwriting improves and they can do so many more things using fine motor skills.
Yeah, and I think you touched on this just a little bit here, Dr. Jen. But when you're working with autistic children, how do you see fine motor development influencing their ability to express themselves and engage with the world?
So once you get to that stage where you've integrated your primitive reflexes, then your brain and your cortex starts to develop. In that development as well, once we get rid of some of the primitive reflexes, which is the moro, then your vagal system, which is the longest nerve in your body, and it's your self-regulating, that comes into play. So what happens between 12 to 18 months is a baby looks at mum to see, are they safe? Is mum okay? Is mum happy? If mum's happy, then it actually develops a vagal system because they can slow their heart rate down, they can calm down. The trouble with these kids that come in is that they don't have that self-regulation. So what happens is they're still dialing fight flight. So when they come in, they want to touch everything, they're in fear. Sometimes they go into fear paralysis, which is when they go deer in the headlights and they just freeze. That's part of their sympathetic system or their dorsal system. So self-regulation is developmental. So your ability to self-regulate, self-soothe is part of development. So majority of these kids skip this step. Because they skip this step, everything is challenging for them. They're constantly in fight flight for most of the time. They don't sleep well. They don't like new situations. They find it very hard to sit still because they're still developmentally not doing as great as they should.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to raising my own children, and I some of the most frustrating moments from their perspective as I watched them was when they were learning to write those fine motor skills, handwriting and they just get so frustrated. So when practicing these fine motor skills, like I said, there can be some meltdowns, there can be some real frustrations there. How do you help families shift from the repetitive practice to maybe purposeful, sensory rich activities that are more like play and to develop those fine motor skills?
All right, so develop the fine motor skills. I often say, let's use things like
Yes,
Play-Doh,
yes.
get some clay, get them to do like manual things, some games, using all of that, not just handwriting. Because handwriting, if you're struggling with that and you get told to do more handwriting, it's frustrating. So then just get games, Lego, things like that, just to get that dexterity. But first of all, do lots and lots of Palmer integration first. And then just get some Play-Doh, get them to build things, using Lego, they're quite small pieces, building, using their hands to do things like that. Or sensory, if they're younger, then just get like sensory play. So you've got your water play, you've got your sand buckets, building sand castles. All of that is building up fine motor skills without it being doing exercises or doing pencils. There's so much out there with sensory play. So all you do is get those things, get them to build, get them to use their fingers, get them to use sensation. All of that is so important in developing fine motor skills.
You talked about the sensory parts of things, and that's such a big part of people with autism is that sensory thing. Talk to me about how fine motor activities activate that tactile feedback, the sequencing and grip strength, and how do those support emotional regulation and confidence in autistic children?
Okay, because basically when you look at developmental, the bottom layer is sensory motor, and then we go to visual. So these kids that come in want to touch everything, feel everything, because that's how they see their world. They can't see it visually just yet. So Justin, if you and I go to a party and we're actually visually scanning the room and we're going, oh, we don't really like that person in the corner, so we're going to avoid them. So visually, we've scanned for safety because as human beings, safety and efficiency is two of our most important things.
Hmm.
As a child who's in sensory motor, they can't visually input what's going on in the world. So at school, you're expecting them to learn visually, but they're still stuck in that sensory motor developmental stage. So they see their world in a sensory motor way. So they will touch and feel everything, even though it's not what you want. But that's how they see their world. So, these kids, they will touch everything, even though you tell them not to touch it. They will touch your table. They will play with things that they're not supposed to because they are seeing the world from a sensory motor way. So we need to get beyond that. So developmentally, we need to put as much sensory motor input so that we can get them to the next layer and they can see the world visually. And school is visual. It's what we
Yeah,
expect the kids to be at visually. They don't like
right.
them moving, touching, feeling, which is how they're seeing the world. So if you understand it's developmental and you understand that's how they're seeing their world and you understand that's what they're looking for is safety cues. They're
Mm.
checking out to see, is this place safe? We can do that visually, but they can't. So they need to touch everything. They need, like in my office, the pot plants, they pull the leaves off the pot plants. I've got a discount next at the nursery because I've gone through so many pot plants. They've thrown pot plants, pots, and because that's how they see the world. So we don't stop them. So when I get a child that came in on Saturday, he sees the world like he likes to rip cardboard up. So he's ripped up books. He's gone and I've got a beautiful plant in the corner. He's ripped up all the leaves because he needs that sensory input to try and calm himself down because he doesn't feel safe. And that's how
How
we
do you,
feel safe.
how do you develop through that? What is the developmental process?
So we need to look and see where they are developmentally. So they're dialing in fight flight. Then we need to start doing things to develop their vagal system. So we obviously use lasers and Resimax and all that kind of
Mhm.
tools. But for a parent out there is looking at and saying, okay, it's as simple as putting a heat pack on their belly. That's stimulating the vagal system. If you look out now on TikTok, on Insta, everything's about vagal. There are so many ways that you can do to help stimulate the vagal system. Humming, singing. So if I have a child who doesn't want to go to school, I say to the mum, how about you put a heat pack on their belly on their way to school, get them to sing, get them to hum, because then you are calming their system down, getting them ready for school.
Yeah, and there's so many large variety of activities, exercises, tools, all these types of things that help with this. What are some examples of other fine motor activities that you've seen that resonate most with children, stimulating that vagal system?
So I think with sensory is getting them a lot of like different textures that they can play with. If you look, there's so many sensory tools out there that they can use. Chewing is one of them. So we like to do a lot of mouth stimulation. So if they get like a vibrating toothbrush, rubbing it around their face, we use the Resimax. So you want to do lots and lots of sensory stimulation around the mouth. These are the kids that chew clothes. And so what you want to do, the face is an amazing window to the brain. The face is incredible on how you can change the brain. So let's vibrate it. Let's get them chewing on things. Let's get them moving their mouth. These days, we're not chewing as much as we used to. In the olden days, we used to chew on our steaks, munch, eat a lot. So then we're getting tone in our face. That's improving. But these days, we're giving them pouches. So they're not chewing as much. So for these kids, what you can do to help their fine motor skills is actually help the sensory motor. Get them to the next level. Get them lots of vibrating tools that they can put on the tongue, little vibration around their face. Using that will make a massive difference.
Yeah, and there are lots of those types of resources and information on the Neurosage Hub as to those materials. You can even purchase some of those things on there if that's something that you would like to do. But there's examples of things like getting a vibrating toothbrush that you can use there that doesn't cost a whole lot of money on your end. So that's some good resources there. Much like the gross motor skills, I mentioned some of the most frustrating meltdowns was when my children were learning to write. It's nonlinear, the progress can be that way. How do you help caregivers celebrate those small wins as meaningful progress there?
Depending on the child, if they are very much, we give them charts. So they have little stars on their chart. So if they do the exercises so much, then they get a reward. So giving them a reward at the end of it, celebrate, and making sure that, like I had a kid that came in that was chewing his sister's shoulder because he's sensory seeking. And the moment they stopped, they said he loved sushi. So they took him out to sushi. So it's making sure that those little things that they enjoy or finding that certain child and rewarding them for that progress, because they seem like small steps, but for the brain, they're giant leaps. So you got to remember these little steps, even though they seem tiny, they're massive changes, massive growth, massive leaps in the brain development.
Very good. And that's such a hopeful perspective to take there. The little things are making big difference, and I really appreciate your insight into that, Dr. Jen. Do you have any other insights that you think would be really important to share with us about fine motor skills before we start closing this out?
I think it's important to realize that when we're dealing with fine motor skill, it's a higher function. So any gains that you get is amazing. That's a higher function. Be able to hold the pencil in a proper grip is great. So keep at it. Don't give up. Don't aim for just perfect handwriting. If the child's not pressing in the paper as much, that's fantastic. If their grip strength is decreased, that's amazing. So celebrate those moments because you're on the path. You're on the journey and you will get there. Every child's different. So some kids get there really quickly. Some kids take a lot longer, but it doesn't matter because, it's a journey and you need to remember your destination. What do you want for that child? Is their best potential. So each gain that we get, even though it might seem tiny or minute, is massive. That's a massive leap because what will happen is the gains will become easier. There's often a stage where it seems like you're going uphill and you're not gaining anything, but that's the biggest gain. Once you get to the top of the hill, things do get easier.
Thank you so much, Jen. And a reminder to those of you out there listening, if you have questions about some of these resources, these exercises and activities that Dr. Jen has referenced, and even the tools she's referenced, you can find much of that information on the Neurosage Hub platform. You can go to neurosagehub.com, check out the platform, and get involved in the community because there are others that are networking with each other and making sure that we're learning things as we go along. We learn as a community, we develop as a community, and we're able to make differences in these children and adults' lives as a community. Remember that fine motor development isn't just about fingers, it's about freedom. And as we've heard today, playful, purposeful movement helps children build the skills they need to express, explore, and thrive. Thank you so much, Dr. Jen, for sharing your insights and for reminding us that every movement is a victory, and what a great thing to do.
Absolutely. Thank you
Uh,
so much. It's been an honor.